Hello, and welcome back to Birth and Baby Talk. This is our first show of 2022. Welcome. I'm very excited. With me, as always, is my pal, Meaghan Grant.
Yes, indeed. It's good to be back, Leanne. It was a lovely break, but it's always nice to come back and share what we know with everyone out there who is watching.
And on top of watching, folks are now going to be listening as well. So, hello to everyone out there in podcast world. If you want, you can watch this episode on YouTube or on our Facebook. You can find us at Birth and Baby Talk on Facebook and on YouTube. You can find us on Instagram and now on TikTok. So thanks for joining us and spending your time with us. Meaghan, I don't know about you, but I'm a little stressed out.
I don't think it's just you, Leanne. I think that is everybody these days. On top of the normal sort of January blues with long nights and short days, not a lot of sunshine and post-holiday letdown, and all of those bills from December suddenly showing up in your email or your mailbox and everything else. We are, world ending 5.0 with Omicron and, another lockdown. Parents are, in theory, kids are going back to in-person next week, but at the same time, who knows?
And that's just for Ontario parents. Parents, in other places may be experiencing different specifics, but boy, oh boy, I think in the end, we're all kind of going through the same thing. We're getting really worn down by all of the measures that we need to take for this pandemic to keep ourselves and our families and our loved ones and, the strangers in the world who we are also trying to take care of. We got to keep us all safe. And I think that is stressing everyone out.
And as doulas, we're also always concerned about our clients and making sure that we are taking precautions when we're going into homes, when we are seeing our clients either prenatally or postpartum. Pregnancy lowers your immune system, stress lowers your immune system. And, so we are also on top of our own families and our loved ones and just community health in general. We have a very specific population that you and I work with who are vulnerable to viruses like COVID. And this will be true long after COVID has stopped to be sort of an emergency situation. Pregnancy always lowers your immune system. Being postpartum, your body is recovering from something really big, a stressor, which is what we're talking about today. And, pregnancy always makes people vulnerable to viruses and infections.
And then in the postpartum period, you have a parent who is recovering from a major physical event. It truly is a physical trauma, and they have a teeny tiny person who is literally coming into the world with, an almost zero game immune system. So parents have the heady task of protecting that baby as well as building their immune system, protecting themselves and, girding their own immune systems, as well as trying to keep everyone around them safe as well. So today we're going to talk about stress. So Meaghan, what is stress exactly?
Right. This is a really good place to start because we all talk about being stressed all the time, but what does that actually mean? There's sort of a idea that it means something a little bit different for different people. And while that's true from like a medical standpoint, stress has a very specific definition. So stress is an autonomic nervous system response. It's a physiologic response to an external stimuli. Now, that sounds like a really broad definition, and it kind of is, but it is on purpose. And what we're looking at are stimuli that cause a specific autonomic nervous reaction, which is a release of cortisol and adrenaline. So these are two hormones that are produced in the adrenal gland, and their response to stimuli is what causes that, like, your muscles tighten, your heart races, some people get flushed, maybe they start to shake a little bit or tremble. That is all part of that stress response. And here's the thing, this is biological. This goes all the way back to, you know, our saber-toothed tiger days when, you know, if there was a tiger, we needed that really fast response so that we could run away and climb the tree and do, you know, whatever we needed to do to get away from the saber-toothed tiger. Maybe we're not running from a saber-toothed tiger. Instead, we're running from, you know, a global pandemic or whatever other stress is happening in your life. But it's this physiological response. It's this release of very specific hormones that results in these external bodily reactions to whatever is stressing you or has caused this reaction in the first place.
So, yeah. So the takeaway is that stress, even though we think of stress as being like a mental thing that happens in our mind, which is this amorphous thing that doesn't necessarily physically exist, we think of it like that, but it's actually a very physical, literal thing that is happening to our body.
Your body is being flooded with adrenaline because the adrenal gland, which is the organ, the gland that releases these hormones, does not know the difference between a saber-toothed tiger attack and your teenage son slamming their bedroom door unexpectedly and scaring the crap out of you.
Yes.
And I only bring up
that to my 18-year-old teenager just so they can understand why I seem to react like there's a tiger in the room.
Because your body is reacting like there's a tiger in the room. Our bodies, so here's the thing, our bodies have evolved to do some really cool things over the millennia. We haven't evolved beyond that stress response. And so it doesn't matter what the stimuli is, our bodies in the immediate react the same. Now, for a door slamming, that immediate stress response is short. And that's okay. Some stress is good for our bodies, but lots of stress isn't.
Okay, wait a minute. So I always thought that stress was bad.
I know, that's like the popular 55 ways to manage stress. I was doing research for this episode. I typed stress management into the search bar for the public library, and I think there were something like 1,035 results or something like that. Like, it was so many books. Stress is something we talk about so often in our culture, but we forget that there's a certain amount of stress that we actually need. And the difference when we're talking in terms of stress is the difference between acute stress and chronic stress. Acute stress is good for us. That shot of adrenaline actually helps your heart. There's some evidence that quick shot of adrenaline helps to clear out bad cholesterol. It helps to boost our immune system because our bodies are primed. Our nervous system goes, there's something I have to pay attention to, and it perks up. It makes us more productive in the short term. It helps us to focus, because you can't be thinking about like what you're making for dinner when you're running from the saber-toothed tiger. So it helps us to narrow our focus into the thing right in front of us, to solve the problem, to locate the source of the scary sound, that sort of thing. Good examples of acute stress are things like a job interview, where you're really like nervous going into it, your heart is beating really fast and your hands are clammy. That's acute stress. That's good. That helps us perform our best when we're in the job interview. Another example can be a big presentation at work. You perform your best because you're a little bit nervous. When it shifts from a very concrete situation where there is a stimuli, stress response, and then it comes down, what we call the relaxation response. And this is the stress response cycle. This is what professionals refer to it as. When we don't get that relaxation piece at the end, where our bodies don't go, okay, we're safe from the saber-toothed tiger, this is when stress becomes chronic. And this is what the experts are talking about when stress starts to impact health. When our bodies experience constant, chronic, long-term exposure to cortisol and adrenaline, it's not good for our bodies. This is when our hearts start to see an impact. This is when rates of strokes go up. This is when our immune system goes down, which is like the paradoxical part of being stressed about a global pandemic is the longer we are stressed about it and the more we are stressed about it, the more cortisol floods our body, the lower our immune system is, and the more likely we are to contract the virus. So, when there is no conclusion to the stressful event, our bodies respond to that constant exposure to those hormones by struggling, by, it weakens the heart muscles. It results in a narrowing of blood vessels or a dilation of blood vessels, which is where we talk about strokes and blood clots and all of those things that we associate with high stress. So we don't want to eliminate all stress from our lives. First of all, that would be really super boring because stress is also linked really closely with things like anticipation and excitement. A lot of those hormones are similar. They all come from the adrenal. Like, we need some stress in our lives. We need stressful events because that's how we relax afterwards, and that's how we find joy in the conclusion of stressful events. But when it is every day ongoing for 21 months straight, that's when our bodies really start to show the wear and tear. When you then add in this time of year, which is a stressful time of year and a depressive time of year, the hormones the body is releasing are not the hormones that are bringing us joy, that are bringing us calm, that are helping us to bond with our families or enjoy life. It's the stress hormones, and they're constant. And this is when we start to see greater incidence of mood disorders, greater incidence of health impact. And, it then becomes harder and harder to break that cycle.
Okay. And so I'm hearing a lot about inflammation.
Yes.
What is that then? And how is that related to stress?
So the thing about inflammation is it's a physiologic response to stressors. It's just in some ways different stressors. It's more the internal hormones and injury, that sort of thing. So when bodies are responding to long-term chronic stress, this is where the inflammation comes in. This is why, it's like, I don't know about anybody else, but getting out of bed in the mornings these days, I'm pretty sure I'm a bowl of Rice Krispies. It's like snap, crackle, pop. Or I guess rice cereal treats. Can we say Rice Krispies? I don't know.
Advertising.
There you go. I'm not sure it's the advertising they want that my body sounds like a bowl of Rice Krispies, but there we go. So when that inflammation occurs, this is where we see a lot of these, heart issues, and inflammation is, narrowing and dilation of blood vessels in your body. So this is where all of these health issues come into play. For anyone, I've been really open about the fact that I have an autoimmune condition. I will tell you that after 21 months of chronic stress, my body thinks it's like 90. And, I have a lot more visible inflammation in my joints right now. I'm having a lot more pain. For migraine sufferers, if you've noticed that your migraines have been increasing over the last sort of year or two, and you're like, climate change, global warming, it's that, but it's also all of this constant exposure to these stress hormones that are resulting in inflammation, that are leading to migraines, colds, heart symptoms, all of digestion symptoms. Everybody out there with IBS and Crohn's and colitis are experiencing a lot of symptoms these days, and it's stress.
Yeah.
It's stress causing inflammation in our organs because our bodies are not designed to have long-term exposure to adrenaline and cortisol, and we don't flush the hormones particularly well when we don't have an end to that stress response cycle.
Okay. Now what can we do about it? What can other parents do about all this stress?
Yeah, so this is where, I was doing a lot of reading over the weekend and leading up to this, a lot of listening to podcasts. There's so much information out there for people who are looking for sort of their own path to relaxation. For anyone who sort of wants to know the two sources I used the most for this podcast, there was, or this podcast and show, I listened to a podcast called This Is Fine. Now, it is a podcast that was produced by fourth-year psychology students out of Mount Allison University in the east coast of Canada. And this was sort of like their fourth-year honors assignment. So I listened to a number of those episodes, and we will post the link in the show notes because I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but the book that I was listening to was Quick Calm. And that had a lot of really practical applications and ideas for ways to integrate sort of calming techniques and mindfulness into your day. So those are the two resources I used. But everything, when I sort of thought about it and I thought about how I wanted to talk about managing stress, everything came down for me to the 3 M's. So movement, mindfulness, and making. Movement, I hate this idea of like exercise. And there was actually, I should find it again, there was an article I saw recently that was suggesting the very word exercise actually triggers a stress response for a lot of people. So don't think about it as exercise. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about literally just moving your body. That could be folding laundry, is moving your body. And frankly, is something most of us probably have at least 1 or 2 baskets waiting in the wings to be folded.
3 or 4 or 12 or 20.
I know, right? The other one that I really like is, I put a song on and I dance in my bathroom while I'm brushing my teeth. So that's, twice or 3 times a day where I'm getting a couple of minutes of just like shaking my butt and dancing around and whatever. And it looks silly and I would never record it and show anybody. But that's my butt. I mean, like real talk. But it gets my body moving. It gets my heart rate elevated a little bit. If you have a pet, Leanne, you and I both brought puppies home in November, December, an extra 5-minute walk around the block gets your body moving. Benefit right now is it also gets you outside. Fresh air is always a good idea, especially for parents who are feeling really cooped up and confined in their homes right now.
Absolutely.
Walk around the block by yourself, with the dog, with the stroller, whatever works for you, anything that moves your body. And the reason for that is we want to counter the stress hormones with happy hormones. So this is dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. Those are the 4 happy hormones that we want to see boosted. Movement helps to boost a number of those happy hormones. Okay,
that makes so much sense. I mean, and like singing. So for me, dancing around and singing is a big thing that I love. So I should be maybe going to the grocery store more and dancing and singing out loud. Is that, because that's usually where I get most of my dancing and singing these days, but
sing too loud at the grocery store, seeing as we know that singing is particularly effective at transmitting the droplets that carry COVID.
I've got a good mask, Meaghan. Someone has to enjoy that music. I'm there for it.
I feel like your kids would be totally thrilled for you to be dancing and singing in the living room, right?
No, probably not. And the dog would just lose his mind. But
the dog.
So working some movement into our everyday and just taking a little time. Yeah, and I like thinking about it as movement instead of just yeah.
A workout.
I like thinking of it as movement and like finding joy in my body. So it feels good to stretch. It feels good to like get the wiggles out and go for a little walk or dance around, do a little
your
yoga.
Favorite song while you sweep the kitchen. You know, all of those things that we have to do on a regular basis, whether it's music or something else that makes it fun, that helps you put a little bit of extra vigor into that movement, that counts. That's all it needs to be. It could be wrestling with your kids. It could be, having a tickle fight. It could be having sex. It doesn't matter. However you are moving your body, that is producing those happy hormones that are really good and that help counter those stressful hormones.
Now, your next M is mindfulness.
Yes.
Now, how does that help us?
Isn't that a fun buzzword these days? Everybody likes to talk about mindfulness and no one talks about what mindfulness actually is. And I will be honest, the idea of like sitting cross-legged and closing my eyes with piano music in the background kind of makes me break out into hives. The idea of having to sit still for that long to meditate, I'm like, what am I supposed to be thinking about right now? That's not my deal. That's not how I do things. But mindfulness doesn't have to be 20 minutes of sitting there doing nothing. That's not really the point. It's taking a small amount of time and being really thoughtful and intentional about the thing that you're doing. And this book that I read, Quick Calm, it has literally dozens of ideas of times and places that you can find that quick 5 minutes. It could be anything from being really intentional about drinking your coffee to a guided meditation. If you hop on over to our Family Doulas of Ottawa on Instagram, I linked a number of different groups and yoga studios and that sort of thing that have meditation classes, that have guided meditation. That was yesterday. So, and they're all ones that I've looked at and vetted or used myself. So they're not like, I'm not sending you places where, it's going to be like hundreds of dollars or anything like that. But also just, I personally, you and I are both knitters. Knitting is inherently a mindful activity. You have to focus. You have to pay attention to your yarn. Another really popular one over the last few years is adult coloring books. Those are really meditative and mindful. You're choosing your color. Think about how it feels in your hand, how it feels on the paper, anything like that. The other thing is just, really paying attention to what you're doing. If you're walking, be mindful about it. Be mindful about what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you feel. Think about your senses and think about engaging your 5 senses whenever you're doing any activity. I mean, maybe not taste. You might not be tasting anything when you're out for a walk, but, think about your senses and think about engaging as many of your senses as possible in whatever activity you're doing and block out all other sort of distracting factors. That's mindfulness. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be an activity you already love and enjoy, and you just take the time to be really intentional and thoughtful about what you're doing while you're doing it.
Absolutely. And I like to, I'm a big fan of meditation and mindfulness as well, especially in relation to preparing for birth. Like that is a big deal for me. And it's something I talk with our clients a lot about. And so I always say, like, it's just about really taking a moment to sort of quiet all the stuff that's going on in your brain and focusing in on a single thing. And you can just I like to say, start with 5 minutes, just sit or lay, like either before bed or before you get out of bed, or when you're having a bit of a stressful moment in the day and you need to take a few minutes, sit yourself down in a comfortable spot, close your eyes and just focus on your breathing and just focus in on, breathing in moderately, holding it for a moment, letting it go moderately. So you can just slow everything down, because I think in our productivity obsessed culture, having 14 thoughts going at the same time, by the way, which scientifically is impossible, but we feel like we need that many things going on for us at every given moment. Taking a pause to just like listen to the air coming in to your body and then having it expel again very slowly, for like 10 breaths is incredibly refreshing. And it's the building blocks of building up resilience and, of course, reducing inflammation. It's a big deal. And there's a lot of really great science behind it as well. And in this month's newsletter, we're going to have a handout about meditation. We're going to have some lists for great meditation apps, so that if you are a new parent or you're pregnant, these can be incredibly helpful for you, especially as you're preparing for birth, to help get you out of your own head, to help you learn to be more resilient and be able to ride the waves of, the stress that's coming your way. That's the big thing. And so
sure. And I'm
the last thing you have in your list is make something.
Yeah, before we touch on that, I'm going to preempt a TikTok video that we honestly haven't made yet, but I'm going to suggest that we make it. And I'm going to suggest that in the next week or two, people go over and hop on. One really easy place to start when it comes to breathing, whether you are pregnant or not, is diaphragmatic breathing. This is the breathing technique that a lot of people teach. We will make sure that we put up a quick TikTok video on that. Leanne's like, I better write this down before I forget. Honestly, I just thought of it. So welcome to how Leanne and I sometimes do things. But this is a really common breathing technique that we teach for labor preparation, yoga, doesn't really matter. This is one of sort of the basic building block steps of sort of meditative breathing. It's a really good place for people to start.
Absolutely.
Now, to go on to what you were saying, the last thing I have is make something.
Yeah.
This one was actually as a knitter, I got it and I immediately clued into what the experts were saying, but it's also a bit of a surprise. Mm-hmm. But the act of creation itself is inherently optimistic.
Joyful.
Create something and be you're not creating out of anger. You're creating with the expectation that you will be able to use the thing that you are creating.
It's an intrinsically hopeful thing to do.
Yes.
Even as much as baking bread, right?
Yeah.
If you put the ingredients together to bake bread, you are hopeful that your bread will rise, that it will bake well. When you cut into it, it is going to give you a delicious thing to eat. It will nourish you and your family. And those are beautiful, happy things, right? So if we put our energy into creating things that will pay off for us, I thought this when I saw this on your list, Meaghan, I thought, well, this is a bit different. But when you look at it, yes, it makes so much sense.
And it doesn't, if you are not a bread baker, if you are not a knitter, it's okay. I'm not suggesting go out and be like Leanne and I and have yarn stashes that could probably insulate a house. I'm talking, it can be really simple making. Honestly, so it can be making a connection. It doesn't have to be a physical thing. I spent last night on a 2.5-hour phone date with a really good friend that I haven't talked to since September, just because life is busy, right? And making that connection, huge boost of dopamine throughout that call. I was smiling, I was laughing. It was honestly the best I've felt in weeks because I was making a connection. That's where that dopamine, oxytocin, all those happy hormones come in. It can be making something physical like a craft, knitting, coloring. It can be taking pictures of your kids on your phone and then making a collage with them. If you are really struggling, and I want to be clear, I have had a really hard month and a half sort of like my mental health is struggling, I know I'm not alone in all of that. One of the easiest things that you can make that we know scientifically has a huge correlation with mood, making a list of things we're grateful for. Gratitude is a huge practice in and of itself. I could do a whole episode just on the benefits of expressing gratitude. But making a list of 5 things you are grateful for is an amazing mood booster. It's something everybody has access to. It doesn't matter if you are at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom deep dark pit that lies to you and tells you life is awful. I've been in that pit. I know how hard it is. I can still be grateful for clean sheets. I can still be grateful for chocolate cake. I can still be grateful for a husband who gives amazing hugs. I can even when I can't see a lot of hope, I can still see small things in my life. And the biggest thing about gratefulness practice that I've been learning about is being really specific. Just saying, I'm grateful to be alive. That's not helpful. That's not giving you that same hormonal happy boost. I am grateful. My 6-year-old gives the best hugs ever. Everyone who hugs Miles is like, oh my gosh, I see what you were talking about. He just like wraps himself around you and then melts into you. And it's just like, it feels like a very Olaf moment for all of the parents who are sick of watching. It's just like he gives warm hugs. And I will always be grateful for his hugs. Doesn't matter how low I am, but that's such a specific thing. I will always be grateful for cheesecake. I will always be grateful for skip the dishes when I don't want to cook. There are always very specific things that you can be grateful for. And another sort of aspect of that is making other people happy. So this is when things like charitable giving is shown to increase your happy hormones. Even just like tipping your skip the dishes person really well has been shown. Like that kind of exchange has been shown to boost happy hormones. So
even as simple as when you're out and about in the world, say hi to the people you see and pass in the world. Say hi with a full heart and just be like, full on, like, hey, have a great day. Like I use public transit a lot. I'm forever shouting from the back door, thank you. And, it makes me feel good. And it makes other people feel good. And it's important to put more good in the world.
Absolutely. Making good is really what making something is about. It doesn't have to be a physical craft or a thing. Although if that is something you find joy in, do more of it. Find that extra 5 minutes, knit that extra row before you go to bed. Just one more row is a refrain in my house. But, anything that is making connections, making other people happy, all of those are going to help boost those happy hormones that are released from your body and brain. And that is going to help to counteract all of those all of those stress hormones that have flooded our body now for so long.
So what if parents are finding it really hard to do these self-directed things, what should they be doing then?
So here's the thing. We can't escape stressors. There will always be stressors in our life. And as I said, if we removed every single stress, talk about boring. Like there would be also no excitement and no anticipation and no joy when you achieve something that was difficult. All of those things are linked to having stress stimuli. So we can't escape it. But when stress becomes so overwhelming, it has taken over your life. It is preventing you from finding joy in parenthood. That was a big one for me when I was a new parent. Is I knew my mood disorder was out of control, when I was no longer finding joy in being a mom, which is something I'd always wanted to be. When you can't engage with your children, with your spouse, with the world around you because you are so stressed, and you can't pull yourself back from that edge, it's time to seek a professional. This is when, therapy becomes really something quite vital. And it's a bit of a difficult, talk about stressors, it's hard to find a therapist these days because a lot of people are in this boat. But there are resources through Ontario Public Health. There are resources if you are pregnant or newly postpartum. The hospital you delivered at likely has a program or resources that they can provide to new parents or expecting parents. There are plenty of community organizations. There are peer-to-peer support groups. There's a number of ways. It doesn't have to be a licensed therapist. It can be another sort of external assistance. But I am a huge proponent, Leanne, you are a huge proponent of seeking professional help when you need it. I see my therapist every other week. I think she is wonderful. And my life would probably be in a little bit more turmoil than it is if I didn't have her to go to every 2 weeks, not just to vent to, but to help me put things in perspective. So, if you are struggling to the point where you truly aren't finding joy in life anymore, your stress levels have reached a point of, I'll say, sort of critical mass, where you need to bring in someone else who can help you work through each of those stressors until you can bring those stress hormones down and start to find ways of boosting those happy hormones again. So definitely seek out professional support, seek out peer-to-peer support. If you have a doula, reach out to your doula or your doula team. They know the best resources in the community. They might even know who's taking patients right now. So, although that can change from day to day, so don't quote me on every doula out there knowing that. But, if you have those people already in your life, use those resources. That's what they're there for. And trust me, they would way rather spend 5 minutes talking you through finding the right therapist or finding the right resource for you than know that you're stressing and struggling and there's nothing they can do to help.
Absolutely. If you're in the Ottawa, Toronto, or Hamilton areas, you can reach out to us here at Birth and Baby Talk, and we will be able to connect you with some local resources for you, or some support services through our agencies, the Family Doulas of Ottawa, Toronto Family Doulas, and Hamilton Family Doulas. Well, Meaghan, thank you. I love this. You think sometimes you know everything about a topic, and then when you dig into it, you learn new things. And I'm really grateful to learn a bunch of new stuff today and to kind of examine stress as a way of sort of externalizing all the stuff that's in our heads so that it's not quite as scary for us. So thank you. We will be back again in 2 weeks, folks. So please return. Please join us on the podcast. Rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. It helps folks to find us, and share the show with your friends. And get signed up for the newsletter.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks again, Meaghan, and we'll see everybody in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.
Bye.